Support for Colorado Today comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Learn more at honestlygood.org.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Safeway. Their pharmacists are here to help, offering a wide range of vaccines including flu, COVID, pneumonia, and RSV immunizations. Visit your local Safeway or schedule online at safeway.com/pharmacy.
Colorado is going stargazing in the boldest way yet by chasing Stardust through space.
Some part of our being knows this is where we came from. We long to return. And we can, because the cosmos is also within us. We're made of star stuff.
Today, CU Boulder's interstellar dust experiment picks up where Carl Sagan left off, blasting into the cosmos aboard a NASA mission from the Kennedy Space Center, ready to catch ancient grains older than the sun itself.
By looking at these dust particles, we can get some information about what our solar system was like many, many years ago.
I'm Haley May. Coming up, the state's top economists have released their forecast.
I would say that a near-term recession is possible.
You'll get the details and how much you can expect from a Tabor refund. Plus, an update into a gruesome investigation at a Colorado mortuary.
It may be down to what was someone wearing when they were buried and things like that.
How families of the potential victims are helping authorities. And fall is officially here.
So the average first snowfall in Denver is October 18th.
We get into the recent weather and what to expect for the rest of the season. It's Wednesday, September 24th. Here's the news in Colorado today. We got a peek into the future this week, the potential future of the state's finances, that is.
The Joint Budget Committee is back, and we're going to learn about Colorado's economy.
State economists shared their quarterly forecasts for the economy and tax revenue. Jesse Paul with the Colorado Sun caught their projections at the State House. Jesse, give it to us straight. What's the prognosis for the state's economy?
The prognosis is not great. Lawmakers get two revenue forecasts each quarter, one from the nonpartisan Legislative Council staff and the other from the Governor's Office of State Planning and Budgeting. Both agencies warn lawmakers that the risk of an economic downturn remains high, if not higher than it was in previous quarters. One economist said that there's a lot of uncertainty in the economy right now for businesses and consumers because of the Trump administration's policies, think tariffs and immigration crackdowns, and also those interest rate cuts that you might have heard about. This is Greg Sabetsky. He's the chief economist for nonpartisan Legislative Council staff.
I would say that a near-term recession is possible. It's not in our forecast. We have economic indicators that show continued health of the economy, and we have economic indicators that show weakening of the economy, and we have some economic indicators that are relatively alarming.
That sounds like a tough situation to have to make predictions in. What's this economic downturn risk mean for the state's budget?
Well, they're directly tied to each other. If the economy tanks, so do state tax collections. A recession would be a real disaster for the state budget, and state finances are already in a really precarious place. The General Assembly held a special session last month to plug a roughly $750 million hole in Colorado's current budget. That was blown open by the tax code changes from congressional Republicans' tax and spending bill. You know that as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. It was signed into law in July by President Donald Trump. But these latest revenue forecasts spell more trouble on the horizon for something separate. That's what's known as Colorado's structural deficit.
Structural deficit. Just explain that to me.
The structural deficit is caused by the rising costs of government programs and services, namely Medicaid and education, blowing past Colorado's annual cap on government spending. I'm talking about the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, or TABOR. The TABOR cap is calculated each year based on Colorado's population growth and inflation. So to put it succinctly, the structural deficit happens when the cost of continuing existing state programs and services runs into that limit on state spending.
Jesse, with everything going on, I'm almost afraid to ask, but what's the projection?
The Legislative Council staff's chief economist forecasts that for the next fiscal year, the structural deficit is going to be nearly $850 million. The governor's office didn't provide the JBC with its own deficit estimate, but it agrees that there will have to be some significant spending cuts to keep the budget in balance.
Medicaid is about a third of the state's budget, so how big of an issue is it going to be?
It is the issue here. Mark Ferrandino is the executive director of the Governor's Office of State Planning and Budgeting. He expects all of the budget growth allowed under Tabor next year to be eaten up by Medicaid costs alone.
What we're seeing is continued general fund increases of north of 10% in Medicaid. And that is just not something that's sustainable. And there has got to be, conversations of how we change that curve.
He's not saying it outright, but basically what he's alluding to is that the state is going to have to take a hard look at its Medicaid program and make cuts to what's offered. But we're not hearing any specifics just yet on where those cuts could come from. This is all on top of those cuts to Medicaid made by congressional Republicans through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. So there is just a lot going on in this Medicaid space.
Jesse, I think for a lot of us, this might sound really familiar. The state had close to a $1.2 billion budget hole during the last legislative session. Have our elected officials come up with a reason as to why we keep finding ourselves back here?
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of deja vu all over again, to quote the great poet Yogi Berra. That $1.2 billion hole was also caused by the structural deficit. Then there was the $750 million gap caused by the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. That's what they dealt with during the special session. Now we're back to talking about the structural deficit problem again with this $850 million hole. I'll just caveat it by saying that number is going to change. The forecasts happen quarterly. The numbers frequently go up and down. Democrats argue that Tabor is the real problem that causes the structural deficit, specifically that cap that we talked about earlier. It doesn't allow for flexibility when, say, Medicaid enrollment shoots up as it is right now. Republicans, on the other hand, though, argue that Democrats who control the legislature have not planned well enough. Either way, lawmakers are going to have to address this structural deficit by cutting programs and services. They exhausted a bunch of budget maneuvers last year to basically avoid doing that, but the chickens are kind of coming home to roost. And I'll mention that the state's tax collections, because of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and the slowing economy, wouldn't even be sufficient to cover all of these costs, even if there wasn't a Tabor cap.
Okay, now one thing we've learned from these forecasts is how much we'll get in Tabor refunds. So how much should people expect?
So you won't actually get a check like we all did during COVID unless you don't have a tax bill. If you do have a tax bill, it'll basically just come off the top of what you owe. Regardless, the refund is not going to be very much money for the 2025 tax year, so don't go crazy and buy a car. The state collected about $300 million in excess tax revenue over the Tabor cap. All of that money has to get refunded, but that only amounts to between $20 and $62 per person, depending on your income. So enjoy those few extra gallons of gas on Tabor, but don't go buy a car.
Okay, Jesse Paul with the Colorado Sun. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
You may have heard Jesse on Purplish, our podcast on Colorado politics and policy, and we've got some good news. Purplish is a finalist for a Signal Award. Now's your chance to show some love. Help us bring home the Listener's Choice honor by heading to vote.signalawards.com and casting your ballot for Purplish in the local news category. But don't wait, voting closes October 9th. And now Arlo is going to give you an update on a story that shocked the community. It's about a private Colorado mortuary where they found an estimated 24 improperly stored bodies last month.
It was a very complex search warrant and processing of a scene that took days.
Armando Saldate is the new director of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. He tells CPR's Ryan Warner about the challenges they face in the investigation into Davis Mortuary in Pueblo County. Identifying whose remains were stored there is a top priority.
When we're talking about the complexity of DNA and the analysis, there's also other methods by which we can identify bodies. I'll probably butcher the name, but it's odontology, and that is the study and identification of people through their dental record.
One thing that complicated the investigation is that the coroner in Pueblo County is also the one who owned the mortuary.
We couldn't use him, and we had to bring in others.
By others, he means experts and other coroner's offices from around the state. But it's been a difficult job to complete.
Are there families in Pueblo wondering if their loved ones are
Yes, unfortunately,
involved?
Yes.
At the same time, Saldate says the families of potential victims have provided significant assistance in this part of the investigation. Some of the bodies that they found had been awaiting cremation at Davis Mortuary for about 15 years, and some of the families received fake ashes of their deceased loved ones.
We needed to communicate to families, and we also needed their information to help us identify potentially these remains. So one of the things we started, and we announced it at one of the earliest press conferences we had from Pueblo. We are asking for some information that will help us in identifying our victims. This will expedite that process. If you or a loved one have called or are waiting for a call back, if you could get on this QR code, that will help. That will take you to a secure site where it can help you fill out that form, get it into the system. That's all.
They set up a tip line, essentially, to help identify the bodies.
We've received, I think my last count was over 1,000 calls that are helpful. All that information is information that goes to the coroners. That helps it. It's a questionnaire that we go on that might help us. It may be down to what was someone wearing when they were buried and things like that.
The governor has declared the situation an emergency, which freed up some money.
So that we may be able to utilize those funds to get some experts around genealogy, DNA processing.
Saldate also noted that the bodies at Davis Mortuary were discovered during a state inspection. Such inspections are new, created under legislation passed by state lawmakers just last year, prompted by another unrelated instance of families being given fake cremains or finding out that loved ones' bodies were stored inappropriately. It exposed a lack of regulation for the funeral industry here. In terms of Brian Cotter, the Pueblo County Coroner, he since resigned from his elected office. Neither he nor his brother have been arrested, but authorities suspended operations at their funeral home. And Saldate said that the Pueblo County District Attorney will prosecute the case.
And we're working with her ultimately on the charging and accountability for those that were responsible for these remains.
You can hear Saldate from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation on other current issues he faces, like the backlog of sexual assault evidence kits. The full interview is in the Colorado Matters podcast.
Whether it was rain or snow, Colorado got its first real hint this week that the seasons are changing.
We had a winter weather advisory in the Rocky Mountain National Park area, so up above about 9,000 feet. Inches of snow.
That's our Denver 7 partner and meteorologist Lisa Hidalgo.
Now, a lot of that's going to melt over the next couple of days as things warm up, but this is just a hint of what's to come.
Now, if you drove at all yesterday on the Front Range, chances are you found yourself on a chilly, slippery autumn commute. That cozy weather certainly more suited for curling up with a book and some tea rather than going to work. But Hidalgo says the extra moisture in the metro was due to a low-pressure system that got stuck up against the foothills.
It's called an upslope flow. Now, if this was midwinter or late winter, I mean, we would have been talking about inches of snow in Denver, but it was way too warm. We had temps in the 50s, and so it came down as rain here.
The rain was welcome, but it did cause problems in burn scar areas. The Lee Fire burn scar near Meeker, for example, got more than an inch of rain, triggering debris flows and briefly closing part of Colorado 13. And while the showers dampened wildfire risk for now, Hidalgo says Colorado can no longer think of fires as being tied to just one season.
Wildfires are unfortunately something that can happen year-round here. I'd say when you look at the big ones that we had this past summer, especially out on the western slope, a majority of those started by lightning strikes. And so as we get out of severe weather season, we see fewer lightning strikes. And so unfortunately it becomes more of a man-made issue when it comes to some of these fires.
The hot, dry summer weather that fueled thunderstorms and subsequent wildfires is also showing up in the trees. If you've noticed leaves changing earlier than usual, you're right. Heat and drought stress trees, which makes them break down chlorophyll, that's the green pigment in leaves, sooner. Once it fades, those cooler nights we've had lately help bring out the yellows and reds more quickly. Looking ahead, the storm should clear today, with sunshine in the forecast. Highs will be back up into the 80s from Colorado Springs to Metro Denver as you enter the first weekend of fall, or maybe second summer. The western slope also stays toasty, but that's pretty standard. Those crisp fall temperatures won't really hit until next month. Reporting for today's show came from CPR's Sandy Batulga, Anthony Cotton, and Ryan Warner. And don't forget, our state politics podcast, Purplish, is up for a Listener's Choice Award. You'll find the link to vote in our show notes. I'm Haley May. This is CPR News.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Learn more at honestlygood.org.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Safeway. Their pharmacists are here to help, offering a wide range of vaccines including flu, COVID, pneumonia, and RSV immunizations. Visit your local Safeway or schedule online at safeway.com/pharmacy.